All right, everybody, welcome back to the Flipping Junkie podcast. Today, I've got a really good friend, Mike Hambright. How's it going, Mike?
I'm great, Danny. How are you?
Oh, doing just great. All right, so Mike has been around the block a few times in real estate and does so many things. I can't even though we had just talked for an hour, I don't think I could list off all of the things that this guy is doing. All of it's related, obviously, all of it's about real estate investing. But before we dig into a lot of that, let's find out a little bit more about you. And you've been on the show, I think probably this is, I think maybe your third time, maybe fourth. But for anybody that hasn't heard those episodes, could you tell us about your start?
Yeah, I kind of refer to myself as a corporate refugee. So we were before we just recorded it, we were talking about like how I met my wife. It just kind of came up. But we met in grad school, and but kind of even going back before that, I had an undergrad degree in finance, and I was really the first person in my family to go to college, and wanted to kind of leave my small hometown in the Midwest that I grew up in and kind of get out of that. And ended up after college getting a job and wearing a suit to work. I worked at a bank, so I thought I was important. And then, a few months later, just realized I'm just a guy in a cube, And honestly, there were like this. I don't know how many floors in this bank, but it was just like a sea of cubicles of other people like me doing the same thing. It was just like we were just cogs in the machine. And anyway, kind of grew disenchanted with that over time and realized like this can't be all that there is. And so ended up moving after a couple of years. That was in Chicago. Moved down to Dallas, 1999. I'm gonna start dating myself here, but for a fellow, I don't know how old you are, Danny, but I think we're close to the same age, so I can say like old guy stuff around you. But then I went to work for another large company, large retailer that everybody would know. If I said the name, is very similar, but it was much smaller. But I was like, hey, there were like there were like four financial analysts reporting to two managers of financial planning, reporting to one director of finance. And it was like, and that I could see my career path ahead of me because everything all the opportunity that existed in that company for me was within about 20 feet of where I sat. And it's like, is this where I'm going to be for like the rest of my career? And there were people there that had been there for like, 20 years or something. I was like, oh my God, this can't be all that there is. And then anyway, so I ended up going back to grad school and getting an MBA from a great program, University of Texas in Austin, and met a lot of great people, met my wife there, my future wife there. But in hindsight, when I look back, it's like, gosh, I was spending all this time to try to improve my resume to get people to want to employ me. And when I got out of grad school, I got a really interesting job, really unique at the time. It was just pretty amazing. But ultimately, after 3 years there, my boss got fired, and I kind of went with him. It was like a package. It was hey, you're that outspoken right hand man, like you're gone too. And then I went to work for kind of a startup that was flying high, and then out of nowhere they kind of filed for bankruptcy, and it's like, okay, second time that I've struck out here, like, what's going to happen from here? It looks like I'm on a trend here of going to work really hard for somebody else and ultimately it not working out. And my son at the time was 2 months old. My wife had left her job as a consultant where she was making a lot of money, but honestly hated it. And so that's when we got into real estate investing. It was 2008. And but it was all kind of based on like, hey, I've always worked really, really hard for other people. I've always like polished my resume and polished my shoes to try to look good for somebody else. And it was like, maybe I just need to take this into my own hands. And that was kind of the beginning of our real estate career. 2008, when everybody else was running away, we were running into the fire.
I was wondering
and of
about
course,
that.
it was just it was a great time to get in. But in hindsight, I didn't know that. It wasn't planned. It was just coincidence. But our first year we ended up at that point, I just had, like I said, my son had just been born, and we just kind of were backed in a corner, of making kind of, we had to make it work, right? And so we ended up doing like 65 houses in our first year, mostly rehabbing, so kind of the hard way to do it. And went on for several years doing 60 to 70 houses a year. And this is almost all in the Dallas-Fort Worth market. And so, flipped hundreds of houses up here. And then over time, it evolved into coaching, and then ultimately the mastermind, Investor Fuel. And I run a lead gen agency now for professional investors. And so it's turned into a bunch of other things, but real estate is what kind of got us here. That's like the elevator version of the story, but I'll leave it at that for now.
Yeah, man, thanks. That's yeah. Every time I hear you say 65 deals in that first year, I'm like, wow, that's impressive. I really, I mean, there's not a whole lot of people that I know that achieve that in the first year. I think it took me the first year to get the first 3 or 4 deals.
You know what it was, and you and I were talking about this earlier, is we realized the importance of, so I think some of the benefits that we learned from corporate America were putting systems and processes in place. And most of the companies that I worked for were really heavy into advertising. So I understood the importance of lead generation, even from an early on. Like I understand it way better now. But at the time I knew it was kind of pay to play. Like there's a lot of people out there hustling stuff up. That's more common today than it was back then, from my experience. But even then we understood that deal flow was an outcome from lead gen. And so we focused really heavy on lead gen. And I think at the time, 2008, what happened was there wasn't really much of a downturn in DFW when we first got started, but maybe 6 months in, we knew a bunch of people that were pretty heavy advertisers that pulled way back. And we saw the opportunity to I think we went from like 5,000 a month to 20 or 25,000 a month. We just raised it up because we saw it was kind of a land grab. It was like, hey, everybody else is pulling out. Like, let's lean into this, And so some of it's dumb luck. Some of it was, none of it, I'll say, was super well orchestrated, but we kind of just leaned in when everybody else was running away.
Well, that's funny that you said dumb luck. I've been drawing this model of the real estate investor journey, and I've got like 4 squares. And the bottom left is, management is low, like you're not really managing the business like a business. And then the x-axis is number of deals. And so if I put on the bottom right, which is a lot of deals, but still no management, is dumb luck. Like, you're not doing it strategically. It's just you're getting, but you were doing it strategically. So I don't want to, like you said, dumb luck, but I think it was a smarter play. And the bigger thing though, is that you saw what was going on, you were seeing, and then you cranked up, right? I think for a long time, I was really cautious about putting so much money into anything, just for fear of something like happening. So let's talk a little bit about that, how you got to where you felt like it was more of an investment. Because I personally, and I know a lot of new investors will, throw $1,000 or $2,000 at a mail campaign or something, and get a couple calls that turn into nothing. And the feeling is like you just threw away all that money. So like, what was your mindset? What was your approach to it?
Well, I think in the first few months, like we were pretty, so both my wife and I have financial backgrounds, and we were very, I guess, kind of financially savvy, more so than the average investor. And so we were pretty good at tracking our numbers, and we knew enough. And we just, had a couple of, not really mentors, but just people that I knew that were in the business that kind of looked up to. And, one way or another, we kind of learned like, hey, you're going to figure out what your cost per acquisition is, advertising cost per deal or per acquisition. And at the time, let's say it was like $3,000, and we knew, okay, well, if I spend 6, I'm going to get 2 deals. If I spend 9, I'm going to get 3. If I spend 12, I'm going to get 4. And we kind of knew enough to understand that model, worked. And it wasn't obviously that clean of like, well, let's double the advertising, we'll double our deals. But on average over time, that's kind of how the math worked out. And so we knew that, and both of us my wife was an investment banker on Wall Street, and I was a corporate guy, and we made a pretty good living, especially for a young family. And so, I think the bar was pretty high for us to not go back into corporate America, even though, everything told me I'm probably just going to get fired again or go work for a company that's going to go bankrupt in a few years. I mean, who knows? But I knew that, we needed to make pretty good money, and I didn't want to dabble. So we just were kind of like, let's go big or go home type situation.
Yeah, see, that's a smart play. I've heard of other people getting into this business after having sold another business, and one person, actually partners, they did, I think they said $100,000 or $200,000 in direct mail out of the gate. And it was like, whoa, like what planet are you on? I mean, that's crazy, because not only because you're not really like not getting some numbers, right? Because you had numbers. You said typically if roughly put this much in, double it, so you had something you were going off of, right?
Right.
So you did try some things out and you recorded or, had somebody that recorded these numbers for you
Yep.
so that you could then make a smart decision. And the key there, I think something that you said too, that needs to be emphasized is the over time.
Yeah.
1 month, one campaign, 5 deals, double that next month, maybe not 10, but averaged out over time, more likely to be closer to 10.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a lot of people, like you, I'm around a lot of really smart professional real estate investors and entrepreneurs now. And I would say if there's a common thread there, and I'll still use dumb luck again. Early on, I didn't necessarily have that, but I think you have to be willing to give stuff a real test. Like sometimes people will throw they almost just want to check the box. Like I tried that and it didn't work. It's like, it was a half-hearted attempt at best. Like you have to give stuff time. And especially with direct response marketing, is if you're building your brand, or especially with direct mail, for example, is those things, it's not like pay per click that the minute you turn it off, the leads are stopping forever. Like direct mail kind of hangs out there. Some of it gets delivered late. Some of it they put in a stack somewhere, they put it in a desk drawer, and they're hanging on to it until the time is right. And so it has a longer kind of shelf life, if you will, than other things. And so you really need to give it time. And plus, I always use the example of, even for you, Danny, like how often do you get some solicitation in the mail to buy like tires or a mattress? Like probably every week, right? But it's like, how often do you need a new mattress or tires? It's like every 5 years or something. I mean, tires are probably more frequent, but how often do you need those things? But those people that are advertising are smart. They know that it's not about converting everybody right now. It's about kind of either building the brand or just hitting you when the time is right. Because when you need new tires, like it's like you need them now, right? You're not really planning it out like 2 years in advance. It's just like, oh my God, I need new tires. I just got this in the mail. It's like, well, you've been getting that forever. You just never paid attention to it until you needed it.
Right. And I collect investor mail that I get from
Yeah.
properties that I have. And,
Yeah.
I was going to say I hold on to, because I just moved. And so I moved a lot of it. And I'm like, why am I holding on to these? I'm not even looking at them, but I still collect them. But I don't know that I would. Anyway, that's not really relevant to the story, I guess. But so let's move on. I think that, as you were talking about checking the box, right? Doing the marketing to do it and having the strategic approach to, I'm going to do this and I'm going to measure it and I'm going to make adjustments and tweaks and see what happens. And with that, I know direct mail, you said something about like it's like it compounds a little bit because like you said, people do hold on to it and they remember the last one because it's not something that's easy to forget, like something you see digitally, an ad that just like you see amongst thousands of ads or whatever's happening. So I'm trying to develop a question here around this. So
Yeah.
So in order to not just check off a box and do some marketing, what is your recommended approach to that? Do you say, somebody that wants to really dial this in should focus on 1 or 2 channels versus like 5 or 10? And for how long do they give that a chance?
Yeah, I think advertising comes in like, it should be approached in like layers, right? You should have some probably base layer that is like your tried and true and works for you. And honestly, for a lot of the most successful investors in the country, in my experience, that is direct mail. Because there's some stuff that comes and goes, like texting is still working really well, even though there's a bunch of threat of like legal issues. And I know several people that have had some legal issues are going through right now, but it still works. And despite all the ruckus over the past like 6 months about it, a lot of people are still doing it. Cold calling works well. But for any of those things, like I don't really know many people that were texting or cold calling more than 3 years ago. Like it's a fairly new thing that has come back around. Like, it's kind of funny to say that cold calling is a new thing because I remember being a little kid and like, somebody's trying to sell you windows and siding over the phone at dinner time, but it's just kind of new again, right?
That was the whole
And
carbs and sheets thing too, right? He was the cold calling. Anyway,
Yeah.
dating
Yeah.
myself with that one. All right.
Yeah. Oh, maybe you are older than me, Danny. But okay. But I think for a lot of people it's mail because it's easy to ratchet up your budget. Like you can expand without having to add more people to do it. You just increase your budget, right? Um, and it's just one of the easier things to execute. Um, but I think you need to have like a base layer of what works, and then you start to test some stuff. Like, let me throw a little bit of money at this and try it, and let me try this other thing. And so you don't want to constantly have everything in your business be a test because
No.
you're just like flailing around trying to like throw spaghetti at the wall and have something stick. So find something that works well and then build off that, right? So
Yeah, because you kind of lose track of what was working because, and
yeah,
then if you're just changing everything completely every single time, you're not even knowing what caused the difference.
right. Most people that test stuff, we were testing websites, this, like a lot of people like tend to change one variable. Like they
Mhm.
might change a color or they change, something. And if you change everything, you can't really isolate, well, what caused the improvement or the deterioration, right? Yeah.
This brings up a really good point. And being that you guys do a lot, because in our conversation before this, you were talking about how much your company's doing with
Yeah.
regards to this,
We're
the
sending
level.
millions of pieces of mail a month for other clients now. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, if you do a test, like you're going to get some results that could seem pretty comprehensive. But my question has always been, because I've always wondered this with, websites and even direct mail and marketing for real estate investors, being that the thing that we're doing is asking somebody if they, would like to get an offer for their house, which is like, how often does somebody do that? And so I've always wondered whether it's really just the timing and maybe the trust and credibility that comes off of the mailing piece or something, but beyond that, like changing a headline or something, or changing a couple sentences in your letter, like what, I mean, do you feel like there's a big difference that you can really get some sort of repeatable improvement by modifying and tweaking copy?
Yeah, I tend to think, and there'll be plenty of people that disagree with this. I think it's way more about the list that you're hitting than it is the copy. Now, I
Hmm.
do think that there's some people that what appeals to them is the local investor, like, that has a picture of their family with a dog in it. Like there's people that appeals to them. And then there's the big corporate, big oversized glossy postcard. There's people that appeal to that, just like a restaurant. And so there's some people that are like, they only go to Chili's and Applebee's because they know what they're going to get. And there's some people that like only go to stuff that is not, franchise type things because they want to support the local economy and they get better service there, or whatever it might be, right? And so I think, I'm saying people probably cross over, but that's something you can test. But I think the copy is probably on the list of the least important parts. I mean,
Hmm.
you're going to say that you help people, you close fast, you pay cash, like those messages. I think people are smart enough now to know that there's this industry out there. I don't think it was that way when I first started in
It wasn't, yeah.
2008, or certainly back when you started. I think that was like underground stuff, like, oh, there's a way to sell my house without a realtor, like, but everybody knows that now. So I think the real important thing is the list, like who are you hitting that's the most motivated, and hitting it as fast as possible, or hitting it at the right time, because the data tells you or indicates that that person is likely to make a move soon, more likely than the average person, for sure.
Yeah, I think you're right with that, and having a lot more weight on whether it's going to produce some results for you or not. And then that was a really good point as well. I just interviewed Lauren Hardy last week, I think, and she was talking about losing a deal out to an investor, Doug Van Soest, I think. She lost a deal to him, and the lady liked her a lot and said, "I really like you, and I want to sell to you, but Doug just," and this was Lauren was talking about when she just started, but he had a professional letterhead, and he had, and that's why I'm going to go with him. And I think it touches, like you said, there's the two. And if I were doing campaigns, I probably, again, would probably do, a test of both, right? You can't just intermix them, because then it's like giving off the wrong message on both, right?
Right.
So it needs to be
Yeah.
maybe a split where one side gets that and then the other one gets the professional ones, and you just see which one works out better.
Yeah.
based
And,
on
and that
either.
stuff is easier than ever to test now. I mean,
Mhm.
using, a call tracking tool to use a different phone number for a different piece. I mean, and now it's hard to test and get conclusive evidence if you're spending $1,000 on each one, because it's not enough pieces and not enough of a response to really tell. But if you're doing bigger budget stuff, it's easier to test.
And how are you? So I want to find out more about how you guys do this, because it sounds like, with that level, you guys have things dialed in pretty well because you have the ability to. That's the beautiful thing about having a company like that, because you guys are able to see and get those numbers, just like at the beginning of our conversation, that first year doing so well, right?
Yeah.
You already kind of had a good idea over time what would happen if you did X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And so you've set up the same thing here with this organization. So what is it like for somebody coming in and saying, hey, Mike, I want you guys to do some direct mail for me? What does that look like?
Well, model wise, we're a little bit unique because we're not just, we really try to become a partner with people. Like strategically, we want to talk about it. And I have a partner in this that's, one of the largest wholesalers in the country. So we test a lot of stuff in his business before we roll it out. But where we're kind of different is we're not a franchise system, we're more like a membership. So somebody commits to join because we have a lot of setup processes. And what we've really done that's unique is at this point, most people have heard of list stacking, right? But we kind of do list stacking on steroids. So rather than just go pull a few lists and compile them and say how many lists is it on, we subscribe to the belief that every list has a different weight, right? So a probate lead, for example, is a heavier weight than a mowing lien. And so we actually, what we do is, and data is everywhere, but it's hard to compile and hard to get. And so we actually have a team of about 70 data miners that for our members that join, we go into their market and we figure out how to get the data, the best data we can and the most we can. So we actually go after about 40 different data sources. So obviously probates is one. There's a ton of different liens, mowing liens, IRS liens, city liens, um, recent divorce records. We're looking at arrest records and when we can get them, and utility shutoffs if we can get them, a lot of different things. And we built some software that we upload this to, and we're gathering this data daily, right? And we're putting it in the software real time. And so what's different is sometimes people will say, well, I pulled a list off of, I won't say any names because I've got a lot of friends that run these companies. I don't want to alienate anybody, but I downloaded a list from some source. So what they don't realize is that a lot of times those list sources are many months old. Like that's not fresh data. Like they buy it from somebody else. And then the other problem is, because we had this early on, is we would go kind of scrape data, if you will, like let's just effectively say copy and paste it.
Mhm.
And a whole bunch of stuff doesn't make it into the end product because it couldn't identify that address, or something was copied and pasted wrong, or it just like it didn't match like the USPS address because we said drive instead of street or something else. And so now we put each data record in individually. So we get all the data and we kind of snap it into the proper address. So we have very little loss. So what happens is a lot of those sources where you're buying data, they're deleting a lot of their data. It's never making it into the final thing. And so some of the least competitive data is not even being marketed to because it didn't make it into any of these systems where everybody are buying their data. So anyway, and then we give everything a point system. So, effectively every house in Dallas County where I'm at has a score, level of distress score, from the most distressed to the least distressed. And that's the order that we advertise in. And we kind of treat them a little bit differently based on their score, but it allows us to identify who is most likely to sell like right now. Right. And so we kind of identified that, advertising for houses is more competitive than ever right now. It's like, how do you differentiate yourself? Well, it's like you win on the fringes. Like, are we removing houses that sold like real time almost, right? Are we adding distress points? Like right now for our customers, if there's a new probate record that pops up today, we're skip tracing that and they're going to get it on Monday every week. So they're getting like hot off the press distress points, and not something that they went and pulled once a quarter when half of those most distressed houses are gone by now anyway. So timing is important. The details are important. And that's really kind of simplified version of our approach. And then we do kind of done for you with direct mail and skip tracing, because we found a lot of people will get a list, and you've probably been there before. I've been there before. Is I would take the effort of pulling all these lists, and at the time, a few years ago, before there were other softwares out there that stack lists, we're doing it all in Excel, and you like, what the hell is this stuff on this tab? I don't even know what it is. Well, just put it in there or leave it out. Or you're like making these decisions that are like huge decisions ultimately, but you just do it so easy because you're just trying to check the box and get done with it, right? And then sometimes it's like, well, it's time to order the mail again, and you're like halfway through the month, and you're like, did you order that? Oh no, I thought you told me to wait. And it's like, next thing you know, your advertising is super inconsistent because you're not doing it like clockwork. And so when people outsource it to us, it literally happens just like a machine. It's like literally clockwork, approach to how we do everything.
Cool. Do you feel like there's like a time to try to drop mail to have it land on a certain day? If that, maybe this gets into the thing about tweaking copywriting a little bit.
Yeah. Well, in the post office, you remember when we were growing up, Danny, it was like, whatever the line was, or like kind of rain, snow, or shine, like the post office is like reliable. That's thrown out the window now. That doesn't happen
You're
anymore.
right. Yeah.
But we do we drop things on Fridays, and our goal is to kind of hit Tuesday or Wednesday, kind of midweek. And so, we believe, like when mail hits on a Saturday, it's not good, for example, and we just kind of know that stuff gets lost. And so we try to hit midweek, but it's impossible to know exactly when stuff is going to get delivered. But for the most part, we try to hit midweek.
So even if people aren't doing done for you with you, do they have access to what the letters that are working are and postcards and things like that? Or how does that work? Is that a separate thing that's only available to done for you?
Yeah. We're you're either in or out with us. But the truth is if you are doing this on your own, I think just get around people or talk to whoever your mail provider is and try to find out what's working now for other people and not. I mean, it's better than what I've kind of found is there's some investors that like they want their personal stamp on everything. They spend all this effort coming up with like exactly what it should look like, and it doesn't look like anybody else's. And it's like, it's just not the best use of your time. Like, on some level, you could say, I don't want it to just look like anybody else's. And on another level, it's like, well, the reason a lot of people's mail looks the same is because it works. Like, so it's more important to hit them at the right time and have the right level of distress.
I'm gonna second that, because I'd made that mistake for way too long.
Yeah.
And had I just been doing the things, because what is your intention, right? Your intention is to buy a house. So who gives a darn what it looks like?
Yeah.
Or half the time, even what it says is just get it out there, measure it, and then tweak and stuff. I even went so far as like listen to a bunch of stuff from Dan Kennedy and a lot of these direct response guys. I got so deep into all that stuff. I was down some rabbit hole, and it was just crazy. I ended up buying some book called The 100 Greatest Sales Letters. This thing is like as big as my iMac, 27-inch here, this book. And it was
like a coffee table book.
Yeah, $250 or something off of eBay. And I read that, and then I wrote letters, and I wrote probably 6 different ones. And when I go back and look at those, I just think, whoa, this is weird.
Yeah.
These are
No,
weird.
and nobody the average person, certainly the average person that we're buying from, is not sitting down and deciphering that. Like, they glance at it. Does this look, if there's a picture of you and your family, does this look like somebody that's trustworthy? They buy houses, but as soon as they put that postcard or that letter down, if you were to poll them and say, well, what does it say? You'd be like, I don't know. They buy houses. Like, they don't know how well the letter was crafted and what are the bullets that said what the benefits of working with you are, for the most part. People are just, their attention span is so short. And so it's just a matter of, making that good first impression, if you will. And again, making that impression to somebody that needs to hear that message, right? Making sure you're hitting the right people.
Right. What do you guys regarding that? Like, what's your take on, you were saying that these lists are updated in real time, right? So it's just continue to use them for how long? I mean, how does that work?
So the distress points, so that's another thing that we do is the distress points. I said we kind of have a point system. So for example, a probate lead is higher than a mowing lien, is the example that I gave. But the points for those things actually deteriorate over time. as well in our system. And so, a probate might have a shelf life of 18 months, and the point value starts at this and it drops down over time. And a mowing lien might drop off a lot faster. And so if left alone, if no new data comes up, the deterioration of that score is happening every month, and keeping the list fresh. But you and I both know, because we talked about this a little bit ago, about if somebody has a high level of distress in their house and stuff, they may not sell today, but they're going to sell eventually. Maybe it's months, maybe it's years from now. But if they've earned their way effectively to the top in our system, they stay at the top until it's sold. Which often the higher level of distress, the more quickly it's sold. But sometimes those houses take forever. But we also kind of break things down, and I would advise people doing this too, is just figure out like what is kind of an A property for you, like it's the type of house you want to buy, and it has the highest level of distress, and then a B list, which it's might be, not quite an 80-20, but you clearly are going to have stuff on the top of your list that's the most distressed, the most likely to sell. It could be the freshest distress points, whatever it might be. And we mail those every 30 days. And then the rest of the list gets hit every 60 days. So we cycle that down a little bit less frequently if it's not as kind of high of a scoring property to go after.
Awesome. Awesome. How are you having feedback from customers as to how well they're producing? I mean, how do you guys track that kind of thing?
Yeah, so we actually are about to introduce some AI that they can connect their phone systems to our AI system, and it'll track, like, because right now the phone numbers don't pass through us. So we're not tracking number of leads, cost per lead, any of that stuff. So we're getting just kind of information back from our customers as we talk to them. And of course, our customers are effectively, there's a fee to join and ongoing management fees and things like that, but they ultimately vote with their wallets. If it's not working, they leave or pull back. If it is working, they grow their business or increase their budgets. And so we're heavily focused on providing kind of a white glove approach. So we have our ear to the ground, really kind of unlike very few people in the industry.
Yeah, that's cool. And the fact that you're leaning into getting it to where you can, get a little bit better tracking because I know that was the thing when we were doing a lot of the online marketing for people. It's always about like, hey, how is this working? We need to know without having to ask, because
Yeah.
sometimes people aren't even attributing it to the right thing, don't know that actually produced that deal for you. So I want to talk to you about, maybe with Forefront, maybe there's some way we can make that easier too for our customers that work with you.
Yeah, for sure. The AI thing, it's a little like we actually we're spending a small fortune on partnering with a company that does AI, but it does a couple things. It's actually pretty interesting. One is, first off, it'll tell us if a lead was generated, right? But secondly, it provides reporting to them on the quality of the conversations that, especially if you've outsourced it to an admin or a lead manager that's taking the call. So now the owners can see the score, and the AI stuff is a little crazy, right, in terms of like what it can tell you from what the machine can tell you, right? But it can score the quality and actually tell them, don't say this next time, say that, and it kind of like
Oh, wow.
helps them improve the quality, but it allows kind of management, if you will, to see the quality. But the cool thing is, if it picks up, if they basically voice the address, we can feed that back, and we can go back into our software and say, okay, this is 123 Main Street. These are the distress points it had on it. This is the distress score that we had associated with it, and this is the quality of that conversation that we have. Like, this is the quality of the lead, and we can actually start to do some machine learning and change our weights on our distress points, so that we can kind of learn and improve across the country for all of our customers. So pretty crazy stuff. But that's kind of where the world is headed. Is how do the most successful real estate investors in the country win? They're doing it by being better on the fringes, right? I mean, we all kind of do this stuff in the middle, but they're doing a bunch of things a little bit better. They're answering the phone a little bit faster. They're following up a little bit better. Their data is more current. Like, it used to be, even if you were inefficient, well, I was still making 20 grand on a deal and I spent $3,000 in advertising. So you can be a little sloppy. And now it's the difference between making 20 grand or 30 grand and zero. Like, those kind of areas on the fringe are going to knock some people out of the game if they're not kind of optimized.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, if you're not stepping up and, people that are using, agencies, or I don't know if you call yourself an agency or not, so I apologize if that's
We
not
kind of
really.
say a lead gen agency, but it actually is, we kind of realize we're much more of a technology company than we kind of let on. But the end result is we help professional investors generate leads. Yeah.
Okay. That you end up with that advantage, right? With all those slight advantages or differences adding up. Just like you said on the fringes, like a lot of it's by itself is not substantial, but as you add them all
Yeah.
up, it becomes very substantial.
Yeah. Yeah. If you think about real estate investing or even lead generation as a sport, like compare it to professional athletes or, I'm not a NASCAR guy, but NASCAR, auto racing, like most people that win are winning at the buzzer, or, I mean, there's not, they're not often these huge like blowouts, right? And it's like, okay, what allows you to be just a little bit better to win? Because all it takes is a little bit, right?
Hmm.
And so, we kind of go by the investor machine. In fact, we're fine tuning the machine constantly to be just a little bit better.
When did you get that domain? Do you have a domain, Investor Machine?
It's theinvestormachine.com.
The Investor.
Yeah. So it's been a few years. I used the brand for some coaching stuff I did a few years back. So we kind of, and that went away. And then I ended up recycling it for our agency.
Yeah, I probably looked into getting that one at some point. There's so many that I toyed around with getting, but anyway, that's outside this conversation. But
Yeah.
domains are, yeah, I don't know. It's like they're one of those things that I just want to collect. But anyway, especially like all the stuff for investor software type stuff. Mike, I appreciate you joining us on the show and talking about direct mail and lead gen. That's always a hot topic for real estate investors. Everybody knows that that's the lifeblood of this business.
Yeah.
And I think what you've shared is going to help a lot of people. If we can recap some of those, it's really, looking at, having some measurement, right? Having in the value or the strength of the mailing and the results that you're going to get are mostly going to come from that list that you have, how well it's updated, whether it's stacked appropriately and ranked and scored appropriately based on so many different factors. And of course, you can do all this stuff and learn how to do it. If you don't have the resources to have somebody like Mike's company, Investor Machine, to do this, but if you do, you could take advantage of that and really, boost your results and your chances of having success, and really more importantly, consistency, right? Because I think it's what we want as investors is consistency, to know that we can grow a team, that we can do those things and really progress in the business. Thanks so much for being on the show, Mike. And if anybody out there listening wants to get in touch with you or talk with you more about it, what's the best way to do it?
Yeah, they can. So, obviously you can see my background here at flipnerd.com. That's kind of what our podcast, and we've been creating content out there for a long time. And then my mastermind is Investor Fuel, which is a professional investor mastermind. And then we talked about today is the Investor Machine. It's the Investor Machine, THE Investor Machine .com. And we really have a 15-minute informational video on kind of our approach. The interesting thing is we're pretty open about exactly what we do, and people can go do it on their own. But other than the fact that there's an upfront cost, I mean, the cost to do this on an ongoing basis is a small fraction of what it would cost the average person to have a marketing manager do it, for sure. And so for somebody to join in their market, it's $1,000 a month management fee. And so
that's a lot better than I thought.
Yeah, it's way cheaper than having somebody else do it. And if you're not good at it, like, what's the cost of doing it wrong? What's it costing you? So it's not really cost prohibitive, although we do want to work with professional investors because we don't want people to come in and out and try something for a month. And, but anyway, that's theinvestormachine.com. There's a short video. You can learn more. And if it makes sense, you can schedule a call with us to, ask some questions and see if it's a fit.
Nice. Thanks so much, Mike.
Yep. Great to see you, Danny.
All right.